Welcome to Kart Class, brought to you by 18 times Australian champion David Serra. Kart Class strives to give kart racing drivers the fundamental driving skills, kart setup, and the mindset required to take you from beginner to winner. Your host, David Serra, has over 25 years' experience in kart racing and is the most successful driver in Australian history.
G'day guys, and welcome back to another of our Kart Class podcast. I'm your host, 18-time Australian champion David Serra, and today we're going to be chatting about whether some kids have natural talent or if everyone can be just as good as the fastest driver out there. Now let's go back to when I started my karting in about 1994. So I was 5.5 towards 6 years of age, and I was sort of getting a little bit of a head start because you couldn't start racing then until you were 7 years of age. Now my dad would take me down to the kart track maybe once a week, once a fortnight. And obviously when you're starting out at that sort of really young age, you start off quite slow. So Dad could almost walk faster than me. And it took me a good, sort of 12 to 18 months till I started getting up to speed. And not just the speed, but being competitive and confident to drive around other karts. So I would say that when I started out, I didn't have any natural talent. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of coaching from my dad and my cousin. And the repetition was what really sped me up and got me going. When I see a lot of kids that I coach at the moment now, it's like they're very fast drivers and then they might be quite young, sort of under 12 to 13 years of age. If they have 4, even 6, 8 weeks off in karting, the next time they actually drive again, they start back to their old habits and they might lose half a second or a second. Then by the time you finish that session, you're only sort of getting back to the speed of your previous day at the track, which was a couple of months ago. Now, I've coached plenty of drivers in the last 11 years. Look, I coach on maybe 150 different drivers a year. So over 10 years, there's probably over 1,000 drivers that I've coached. And I would say there's definitely, probably 5 to 10 drivers that have stood out. And when I say stood out, it's more that they could pick up things a lot faster and it just sort of came naturally to them. So without sort of a lot of, drawing things out or walking the track, they just had the sort of the skills to pick things up a lot faster and to know what to look for themselves. Now, what that meant is that they got to certain milestones and to certain goals a lot faster than, say, drivers like myself did when I was at a very similar age. But when the drivers who took a little bit longer to digest the information and to actually put it into practice and on the racetrack, they could both still get to the same point. So what took one driver, say, 2 or 3 days of coaching or, a month's driving, where the other driver took, say, 6 months of driving and maybe 15 days of coaching, for example. But once they both reached their peak, they both were neck and neck on track. So whether you are naturally gifted, and now you see a lot of drivers, and it's different ages as well, but that come from, say, a motocross background that jump into a kart, they can pick things up faster. I'm not sure the reasoning behind, going from 2 wheels to 4 wheels, but I've seen a few kids and a few older drivers that have just picked it up very, very quickly. Now, they've obviously already got the speed down pat, so when they're cornering, they've already ridden at certain speeds around corners, so that's that perception. But one thing obviously is going sideways on dirt and then going nice and smooth when it comes to kart racing. But as I said, like if I'm looking back at myself, even when I started racing at 7, and so I'd started driving, I was basically, say, nearly 6 years of age, driving for a year, and then looking to actually race when I was 7. I wasn't consistently winning trophies until I was sort of, 8.5. So that was almost like 2 years of driving before I actually became sort of competitive and, like I said, confident with other drivers on the track. If you look at my cousin James, he's won 6 Australian titles. So, a very, very accomplished driver, has raced against some of, Australia's best supercar drivers all throughout his career. I can't really remember him driving because he's about 9 years older than me, but my dad used to say he was probably one of the worst cadet drivers he'd ever seen. Just hopeless, didn't pick things up, would just cruise around the track. But then literally as soon as he stepped into a faster kart, so in a junior kart, a slightly bigger kart, he could fit into it a little bit nicer. It was like a light switch moment where he literally just started to be competitive against kids that he never was previously in cadets. And then all of a sudden, developed these skills very, very fast, but it was at a slightly older age. So as I said, I see kids all the time, help kids as young as 6, and then you're helping kids sort of at 15, 16. Even if they start that a little bit later, obviously, to begin with, you're a little bit behind the 8 ball because you might be up against drivers who have driven for 3 or 4 years before you. But when you're slightly older, you can actually pick up on things a lot faster. So if I'm explaining something about a certain apex point, so whether it's slightly a later apex or a later turn in, then straight away what we're noticing is those kids can pick up things a lot faster. So it might take them only a couple of days and all of a sudden they're up to the speed. And that's where it doesn't really matter if you start a little bit later on, because you can pick up things faster and still get to that same point as these drivers who can pick up things a lot faster. Now, I think one of the things that's helping the kids get up to speed a little bit faster is literally just having that hand-eye coordination. So we're seeing kids who can play multiple sports, or who might be really efficient on both sides of their body. So whether they're not sort of left-handed and right-handed, but can catch the ball in both hands and kick a soccer ball or a football in both feet. They're the sort of kids that can pick up things a lot faster on the racetrack. So as I said, it comes naturally to them a little bit easier. But with the access now to so much video footage, whether it's YouTube or it's your own GoPro footage, or you're just watching other motorsport on the TV on different channels now, drivers can just pick up things a lot faster. So we're seeing that progression for drivers happening a lot sooner. And it's not taking them that 18 months like it was for me previously. Simulators now, they're so realistic now. It's making it a lot simpler for a driver to hop into a kart for the first time, and straight away they've got a decent perception on how to drive a kart. So if you do find yourself taking a little bit longer to learn things, just know that even for myself, it wasn't that I was naturally gifted, because I was definitely far from that. And it was repetition, it was hard work, and it was getting good coaching. Like I said, it was just from my dad, but he'd already had probably 5 or 6 years of experience in driving a kart himself and just teaching himself. So he sort of knew what to look for, what not to look for. And yeah, basically that's how it sort of helped me and my cousin James progress through the ranks, even though, like I said, we were slow starters. So don't stress too much if you are in front of a driver now that in 6 months' time they've gone slightly by you, because as we know, as human beings, we learn at different rates. So someone might be able to pick up things a lot faster, but if you're learning the right techniques, then there's no reason why you can't get to that same point at a slightly later time as well. So if you guys are having any dramas with your kart racing, be sure to check out some of our kart class programs online at kartclass.com. We're sort of targeting the beginner drivers for our beginner program, and also the more advanced drivers who've got a little bit more experience in our Champions Club program. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's episode of our Kart Class podcast. Feel free to shoot us through any questions that you may want answered at info@kartclass.com, and we'll be sure to give you a podcast on your question. I'm your host, 18-time Australian champion David Serra. Thanks so much for tuning in. Cheers.
If you've enjoyed today's episode and want to learn more about your kart racing, be sure to check out kartclass.com.au for driving courses catered to all skill levels.